Welcome to an Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition Let's Play. Today we're going to be playing the story of a rough and tough ruffian and bandit mercenary who winds up helping a republic and then marries a woman of noble birth. No, this is not the story of Han Solo, it is the story of Francesco Sforza. We're going to be playing the Sforza campaign. Now, one thing about these Let's Plays is they're not just, like some of the other Let's Plays, we just see someone playing through the scenarios. Since I'm the designer of these campaigns, I'm able to kind of talk about some of the design choices, some of the story, and provide some of the information and the history behind the campaign. So the first scenario here is called Mercenaries and Masters. I'm going to be playing on hard. And the title of the scenario actually is a reference to one of the books I use as a reference for this campaign called Mercenaries and Their Masters, which is a pretty interesting book about the Italian condottieri. So let's dive right into it.
So, you want to know about Sforza? I will tell you about Francesco Sforza. Sforza was like me. We were condottieri, contractmen. When the Italian princes were too rich or too cowardly to get their hands dirty, they paid us. We fought because they paid us to fight. We stole because they paid us to steal. And when they did not pay, we made sure someone did. We sold ourselves to the highest bidder, and if another prince came with a bigger purse, we did not hesitate to change sides. Honor was cheaper than silver. But for Sforza, Sforza was different. He was in it for his own glory. That is why he took the Visconti contract. He wanted to make a name for himself, to be more than the bastard son of a dead mercenary. He needed a patron, an ambitious prince with many enemies and more gold than friends. Filippo Visconti, the Duke of Milan, was the obvious choice. Visconti had all the ambitions of Caesar, but none of the courage. He was craven and paranoid, but at least he paid. Well, most of the time. And whether his ambitions meant war with Florence or with Venice, Visconti always needed contractmen. That is why he hired condottieri like Sforza and Niccolò Piccinino, hungry men looking to make a name for themselves.
Well, there you have it. Now, you might have played this campaign before in the HD edition, or you might have seen the Viper played a few years back. The thing is, this campaign is completely new. It's been completely redone from scratch. All new story, all new scenarios, all new maps and triggers. So it's a completely new campaign for Definitive Edition. In fact, the first scenario of the HD edition, if you might have played it before, Francesco Sforza there is a very young man. He's fighting alongside his father. For the Definitive Edition, I jumped ahead many years. He's already an established mercenary captain. He's now in the employ of Filippo Maria Visconti, who is the Duke of Milan. And at this time, Milan is in a war against the cities of Florence and Venice. And so we begin in the city of Brescia, which was Milanese controlled. Sforza's cousin, Micheletto Attendolo, is defending the citadel of the city, but much of the city has already been taken by Venetians. So as a true condottiero would, he doesn't care about, fighting to the last man. He just wants to get paid. So he's going to leave the city to fight another day and get paid another day. And so our first objective here is to escape Brescia. And you can pause the video here if you want to read some of these hints or the scouts here, but they provide additional information on the scenario. And let's go right into it here.
Only a fool would die here for a few coins. Come, men. Let us fight our way out of the city to reach my cousin Francesco.
Micheletto doesn't care, he just wants to escape the city.
Do not let the Venetian Surans make Brescia your grave.
So I'm going to let the infantry here fight, but I'm going to get my cavalry out the gate. I can either use this gate here or this gate, but I'm going to run out the city, escape Brescia, and then link up with my cousin Francesco.
The Venetians have taken Brescia. We will not get paid unless we retake the city. But beware of that bastardo, Damagnola. He will attack us.
So Micheletto has now reached his cousin Francesco Sforza, and he's warning us that there are other factions here on this map. So our main objective is to take Brescia. We won't get paid. And ultimately, that's what we're here for. We want to get paid. So our main objective is to destroy the Venetians here in Brescia. But he says that there's Florentines here in the west and Carmagnola in the east. Carmagnola was a very famous condottiero who primarily served Venice, and they will threaten us. And so while there's going to be some more talking here, I'm going to start training some of the units that I need and just let the story kind of go.
I know your cousin abandoned Brescia to the Venetian dogs. No bother. More gold and glory for me. Do not get in my way.
That was Piccinino, who is our ally in this scenario. We'll talk about him a bit more. I'm going to get a message here from our employer, our boss, Filippo Maria Visconti.
You are failing, Sforza. I shouldn't pay you, but take it. Do not disappoint me. I will have Piccinino stab you in your sleep if you fail me again.
He said he's going to stab us in our sleep. A very aggressive boss we have here. But basically here, this scenario is a little different than most scenarios. It's not, you don't really have an economy. I mean, it makes sense. Francesco Sforza, he's a mercenary captain. He's not going to be farming and gathering wood and stuff like that. So instead, I started with a stockpile of resources, but then I'm going to get additional payments of my contract from my boss, Visconti, and I'm going to use those resources to train my army and research technologies. I want to be pretty thematic, I think, here. I'm going to train primarily arbalesters and condottieri, really be thematic to the Italian civilization. Maybe since I think I'll end up having a lot of food, I'll train a couple light cavalry, as well as some monks to heal up some of my forces. But overall, I'm going to take this scenario, I'm going to play it kind of like I think a condottiero would have at the time, and I'm going to talk a little more about that. Here we have our ally, Piccinino. Now, he will help us. In fact, my approach is going to be primarily just complete the objective, destroy the Venetians in Brescia, and I'm going to let Piccinino kind of deal with the Florentines and Carmagnola. Now, I could easily get bogged down this scenario. It's on hard difficulty. If I spend a lot of time trying to fight the other factions, I'm going to end up, this scenario could last hours, right? I'm going to think like Sforza. What do I have to do to accomplish my mission to get paid from the Visconti? Destroy the Venetians in Brescia. That's my objective, right? So I'm going to let Piccinino do the hard work of fighting the other factions, and I'm going to concentrate on achieving that objective. And I'm not going to fight until I actually have to, and I have a force that I think I can do a lot of damage with. So again, I'm going to kind of stay back here in my base. I'm going to be very cautious. I'm going to just keep accumulating my payments from the Visconti and building up a force while allowing Piccinino to do some fighting. Now, Piccinino is my ally here. He was, historically, he was sometimes an ally with Sforza, and other times he was a rival with Sforza. In fact, their rivalry, the rivalry between Sforza and Piccinino, really colored 1400s Italy. It was a big factor in a lot of the conflicts during that time. And there are a lot of other famous condottieri, like I mentioned, Carmagnola, who primarily served Venice. He was another big factor here, as well as another condottiero named Sigismondo Malatesta. A lot of these guys were sometimes friends, sometimes allies, sometimes enemies. Really interesting dynamics here. So while we're kind of waiting to build a force, I'm going to just for the heck of it, just kind of maybe scout around, look at some of the map here. You know, there's lots of aqueducts and ruined Roman temples, and I'm really just going to be cautious. Now, what was a condottiero? In Italian, condottiero means a contract man or a contractor. What they were military captains who were contracted.
Now show that you deserve it.
Got another payment, so I'm going to keep training arbalesters and condottiero. And I'm going to start trying to get some of these upgrades as well. Actually, I should probably sell some of this food I probably don't need and get some of these upgrades for my infantry and archers. So they were contract men. They were contracted by a city to recruit a bunch of soldiers and then fight in a war. Usually the campaign season in Italy was in the summertime. Now, Italy was a lot different than a lot of other parts of Europe at this time. We're talking the 1300s, the 1400s, so basically the late Middle Ages, the Renaissance era. While England and France, you see Piccinino's fighting the Florentines here. While countries like England and France had a central monarchy and there was some aspect of like a national identity, Italy was very different. It was primarily a bunch of independent city-states. Some of them were ruled by dukes. Other ones were actually republics, like Venice, for example. And while the Holy Roman Emperor had nominal control over much of Italy, in practice, a lot of these cities were independent. And Italy at this time was fabulously wealthy. It was a center of trade, a center of industry. And so it made sense if you were like the Duke of Florence or the Duke of Milan, you didn't want to really, you wanted to get into wars with other factions because you wanted to, you know, capture trade routes and get money from other cities. But the challenge was you didn't want to conscript all your craftsmen and your merchants into an army. So the mercenaries, the condottieri, really provide an opportunity for these city-states to wage war without really suffering, without the people suffering some of the consequences. Now, the first condottieri were actually primarily foreigners. What ended up happening was in the 1300s, the Holy Roman Emperor had attempted to invade Italy, much like Frederick Barbarossa did in the Barbarossa campaign. But when those wars ended, there were all these German troops who had seen the wealth of Italy and stayed in Italy, but what could they do? They were just soldiers. And many of them did end up becoming bandits and brigands, but some started selling themselves into military service as mercenaries, and they started forming one of the first free companies, which were mercenary companies, the precursors to the condottieris. And these were primarily foreigners. They were primarily Germans and French and even Englishmen. There was one very famous mercenary named John Hawkwood who was English. But then as the decades went on, native Italians started getting in on this as well. And you start seeing a lot of minor nobles and commoners take up arms and be condottieri. So eventually they became less and less foreign and more Italian. And that did end up changing the character of some of the condottieri a little bit because of the fact that because they were native Italians, they started being a little bit more involved in domestic Italian politics, but for the most part, they were only there to really get a paycheck. I'm slowly going to start moving this army closer to Brescia. I'm really going to try to tear down the gates here in Brescia and focus on the Venetians. Yes, they will spawn more units, but I think I have enough force that I can start wearing them down here while training some more units here to send as reinforcements. I should probably get the upgrades for my condos as well. These upgrades here. And so the thing about condottieri were they ultimately fought for money, for a paycheck, right? And so I'm going to kind of take that approach here in this scenario. I mean, why do I have to fight the Florentines? Piccinino is actually doing a fantastic job here fighting the Florentines, or worried about Carmagnola. Let me do what I need to do to accomplish the mission, complete my objective, basically, and get paid. So I'm going to take that same approach. And the thing is about the condottieris, that was kind of their tactical approach. They wanted to live to fight another day and get paid. And if you came along with more money, if you were a city, for example, if a condottieri was hired by Milan to fight Venice, and Venice offered a much bigger paycheck, those condottieris would often flip sides. And so there was often an issue where condottieri would be betraying their former masters. And sometimes a city may not be able to even pay the contract. And let's say they lost the war, let's say Milan lost the war, they can't afford to pay their mercenaries anymore. What would happen? Those mercenaries would then start rampaging through the villages and taking whatever they could. And so you end up seeing this pretty negative reaction at the time about the condottieri. They were a scourge through Italy. Machiavelli commented about them being such a scourge and being a bit of cowards. The thing about that was that they weren't actually cowards. They were just very smart, very professional about the way they approached combat. They weren't like the knights, like French knights charging across a muddy field into arrows fired by longbowmen. They wouldn't have done stuff like that. They were much more smarter than that, much more professional. And so kind of with that same spirit, I'm not going to get bogged down fighting these other factions. Let Piccinino worry about them. I'm going to go straight for this objective here. I think I have a pretty good force. So I'm going to primarily use lots of arbalesters. I'm going to use my melee units here to batter down this gate, and I'm going to take all my arbalesters. I'm going to try to pick off some of these condottieri back there, as well as some of the hand cannoneers, and wear them out. Let's poison here too. And yeah, I'm going to take some losses, but this is probably the most decisive way I can end this scenario. Yeah, I'm playing hard. I can't get bogged down. I don't want to do that. I want to go straight for the victory here. I have a pretty powerful force, and I want to use it. And that really kind of reflects some of the approach condottieri I've had. They really started professionalizing the late medieval European armies because of the fact that because there's a profit motive and you need to get paid, it didn't make sense to have the entire mercenary company get wiped out in a single battle, right? And so you approach things much more tactically. You worried about your supply lines, you worried about your logistics, and you didn't want to have a battle that would result in ultimate defeat. So you were very choosy in terms of which battles you fought. This is all these troops here that I'm fighting. So Condottieri really took advantage of things like terrain and tactics and stuff like this that really professionalized their armies and transitioned Europe away from some of the feudal, kind of more primitive militaries to more aggressive, or I should say, more modern, sort of scientific military. And I've wiped out quite a few of these guys with my powerful arbalesters here. I'm going to ignore these towers, they're not really important. And I'm going to just continue trying to clear out these condottieri defending the city here. Great job by Piccinino. He's wiped out the Florentines. Don't have to worry about that.
There seems to be a bookkeeping error. You will not get your next payment. You are a savvy condottiero. Figure it out.
Well, there you go. Visconti's not paying us. He's unable to pay us. He's a little bit of a bastard here, but he's not going to pay us. And Piccinino's going to come up with a recommendation.
Visconti is an ungrateful fat dog, isn't he? I recommend you sack the local markets for resources. No one became rich by being honest.
So Piccinino is recommending we sack these markets, like I talked about. Sometimes these condottieri would just rampage through the countryside. I don't have to do that right now. I think I'm close to winning. I'm going to try to clear out the last bit of the nations in Brescia and finish out this scenario. Pretty quick, actually. We're under 20 minutes here. I want to talk a little bit more about the condottieri. I don't think I have that much time, but you kind of see the approach I had in this scenario on hard was to really just strive forward to the objective. Basically, be like Sforza, be like a condottiero, and just concentrate on what I need to do to accomplish a mission and get paid. And that's exactly what I did here. Let's try to wear out the last bit of them here. I think it's the last one.
Maria Virgine, we have done it, Francesco. But watch yourself, my cousin. With every victory, others grow jealous.
Some words of warning from our cousin Micheletto. That concludes the scenario. So kind of going to do a quick flyover of this scenario. You see that he wiped them out. This was Carmagnola's base. You can see there's lots of like Roman ruins, this temple here, and aqueducts. A lot of stuff I could have gone explored, but I'm not here to be a tourist. I'm a condottiero. I just want to go accomplish a mission, survive to fight another day, and get paid. And that really was my approach in this scenario. So we're going to go here, listen to the rest of the story.
Visconti distrusted and hated us, but I do not blame him. His own brother was murdered by a condottiero on the steps of a church. Visconti saw Sforza's successes as a threat and plotted to have him killed. But instead of running to safety, Sforza confronted the Duke directly. To our surprise, Visconti was so impressed by this boldness that he dismissed the charges against Sforza and betrothed the soldier to his daughter Bianca. This made Sforza the Duke's heir. I will say this about Sforza. He was a scoundrel, but he was no coward, and his courage was always repaid.
Very, very bold man, Francesco Sforza. He was definitely a man of his age. Really had that true condottiero spirit to just get what he wanted and get paid. Had that Fabrizio, that cunning. I think I kind of showcased a little bit in this scenario and the way I played it. Again, it wasn't hard difficulty, but it was pretty easy. Completed in 20 minutes here. Could have got bogged down, but didn't. Went straight for the objective. I hope you enjoyed this Let's Play. Obviously, it was pretty quick, so I wasn't able to talk much about Francesco Sforza's life. But I hope to be able to do that in subsequent videos. If you like this video, please subscribe, like the video, and stay tuned for later videos of Francesco Sforza campaign. Thank you.